Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio for the Late Show with Brent Poland and Adam Spence. And Brent will be joining us in just a moment. If you've clicked play on this listening back, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. This show is sponsored and supported by Pearson MFL. If you want to find out more about Pearson and their work, then we can hopefully share with you some links and information as we go through the show this evening once Brent joins. And we can talk about some of the things that they have on offer, particularly with their new GCSE specifications. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Brent. Just need to unmute, Brent.
Oh, thank God for that. I was thinking, is something going wrong? You know, you do that double take, you think to yourself, is something happens to my technology working? You have technology fright. Yes, so tonight I'm on my holidays tomorrow morning, which is fantastic, and I'm sure that some people working up to this week. I'm sure some of our listeners in the continent have already broken up. I know that anybody who's from my original homeland will have broken up at the end of June, and they'll go back to September. And I know certain people have been having a go at certain people who still, despite, the summer holidays, educators don't rest. We don't rest. We kind of put things to the back burner. But we're always looking for opportunities, aren't we? I mean, that's the thing. I'm taking my children away on a trip, and I'm always looking for the educational value in what I'm doing. Which brings me to what tonight is really going to be about, which is what is the educational value in school trips? Because my theory is that educational trips, much like many other things, are one of those things that are slowly dying death by a thousand cuts. The first time I was on a residential was last week. Not for the want of me volunteering or for not being up for it. I've always been one of those people who's always wanted to go on educational trips, because it's one of the reasons I became an educator. I'm originally a geography teacher. I'm now a head of history. I've always loved both subjects. But as a geographer, I love the world. I've traveled the world myself. I went to Australia with next to nothing, no credit card, got a job at the Olympic Games. And I've always had that little bit of the Irish charm, being able to open doors. So I once worked in a casino in America where everybody thought that I was a lucky leprechaun. Where did I get some of that confidence from? I got some of that confidence from the fact that I did lots of residentials as a child. And even though I came from a very impoverished background in an area that was the middle of the Troubles, my school always ran residentials. They always ran retreats, religious retreats. They had geography fieldwork. I never forget my geography fieldwork. That took me up the Mourne Mountains and on a residential outdoor pursuit centre at 15, 16. And it was one of the reasons why I chose my A level. And then at my A level, I remember going up to County Donegal to do a beach study on the wild Atlantic coast. And it was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Proper, hardcore, good old-fashioned residential. The teacher being quite relaxed and having a little bit of a pint of Guinness while he wasn't looking. Well, actually, he was looking. So he was joining us. So that's the thing, is that's what it's going to sound like, good old days. But that was the good old days. We went on residentials. Children didn't have 75 different dietary requirements. There wasn't 55 pieces of paperwork to fill out. There wasn't evolved systems. There wasn't, multiple telephone communications devices that children could stash God knows where and let their parents know what's happening on a residential before you've even found out what's happened on a residential. And I get why they are something that is dying a death. COVID, of course, has put pay to it. I'm going to mention the B word. I'm sorry, I'm not going to offend people here, but it has been more difficult to go to the continent of Europe as a result of Brexit. So, cost of living crisis, children can't afford, parents can't afford, residentials. So, and also is the willingness within the teaching profession as we've become more corporate. And as people are becoming more corporate, you don't get paid for going on a residential. It's a point I made to children last week. After 3:15 or end of school time. I mean, that's it. This is free. This is the time that I'm giving towards them. And when they weren't going to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, I took their free time off them and reminded them that I had, given up being with my 2 young children to be here. And I had no problem saying that to some parents when it was quite clear that their children weren't behaving. As I'm here with your children to ensure that my children don't see their father this week, but thanks very much for that. And I have no problem guilting people into that, because the fact of the matter is it's a big ask. It's a big ask. It's a big ask and a big responsibility. And in the world of litigation and the world of blame culture, can I blame some of my colleagues if they don't want to take A, the risk, B, the hassle, and C, what are they going to get from it? They're just going to get criticism. Thankfully, at the end of my last residential last week, there were quite a few parents that stayed behind. They knew it was the last week of term. They knew we were exhausted. A couple of handshakes, a couple of thank yous, a couple of well dones, a couple of how did you cope, and thank you and fair play. And that makes it all the worthwhile. I've still in touch with a lot of my ex-pupils over the last 20 years. Some of the best memories I have of them were found on residentials. Ski trips in Chevalier in France, international exchange, Dubai, the UAE. I've taken children to Nepal to doing a world challenge where we've climbed the Himalayas, nothing more amazing. Taking trips to the battlefields in Ypres, which is absolutely phenomenal. Haven't done that in 7 years. Again, the person who had the expertise of that left the school. And as a result, I just haven't been able to find other people to help me organize that trip. But we used to have a biannual trip to Ypres and Thiepval. And you sort of said to the kids, we were taking you to the battlefields of World War One. We're taking you to graveyards, which sounds like a Tim Burton movie. It sounds quite macabre. But there's nothing more powerful than taking a 15-year-old to the grave of a 15-year-old and watching their brain just try and understand that someone their age fought and died on the battlefields of Passchendaele. It's extremely powerful. It's a very, very powerful moment. And I've done that where I've had, a very hard to reach, rebellious student who many said, you shouldn't take this kid on a residential. You shouldn't take him what a risk you're taking. You're silly. He doesn't deserve it. And myself and my other colleague, the head of history at the time, thought, no, this is the perfect trip to wise him up. And I never forget when he was standing next to the grave of a 15-year-old, and he just basically had a complete meltdown. He just couldn't understand it. This person's my age. What was he doing here? Why? That this is ridiculous. And the feeling that was defining in that moment of that young man's life was palpable. I could feel as if there was a cog ticking and that some seed had been planted and some idea and some version of the world is now in a parallel universe. That boy is a different boy as a result of us taking him over there. But that again comes back to the times that we were able to do that. I haven't done that in the last 7 years. I haven't been able to do that in the last 4 or 5 years. And equally, the funding's not there. But if I was given time, unlimited resources, would I take children to the likes of Auschwitz? Absolutely. I'd love to take children. And one of the things I always advocate, any sixth form child or any school, any sixth form college, I think they get funding for a sixth former to go to Auschwitz, Birkenau, Monowitz. And I've always encouraged any of my pupils when they go to college to apply for that, because that again is extremely important for shaping their sort of understanding. And they have to go there and come back and then disseminate what they have learned for others. They don't just go there. They've got to come back and they've got to do talks about it and they've got to express what they've found out to the rest of their college, which in itself is quite, how do you communicate what the visceral sort of the visceral feeling you get when you see the gas chambers or or the cold chill in the air when you see the cells of those that were tortured. How that peer to peer is extremely powerful. And I've seen one of my ex pupils deliver a talk on that, and coming from a young person to other young people is phenomenal. So the power of school trips is unbelievable. I mean, but yet it is something that is no longer really a priority. It's no longer something that is high on the agenda. It's an add-on. It's a kind of, well, if we get round to it. And this is on Gove. I'm not going to make a statement about Michael Gove, but I do want to make a very, very clear I am going to make a statement. I think it's absolutely disgraceful that the fieldwork element of subjects like geography has been completely delimited, and the coursework element and the fieldwork element of geography has been, I think, downgraded. And certainly now, if I was reflecting on who the learner I was at 15, 16, and I wouldn't be getting the same experience that I got as a young geographer at 15, 16, where I was doing my measurements and actually out in the wilds with within safety. Don't get me wrong, I was a bit reckless for my age back then. I probably was a walking risk assessment myself. These days now, I would probably not want to take a kid like me on a residential, because I was a little bit of a live wire. But I was just curious about the world, and that I had the confidence to be curious about the world. And I'm so glad I got the opportunities, even in a secondary school when I failed the Olympus, even from a poor background. There was more enough assistance there. The school subsidised those trips. My World Challenge at 18, which probably changed my life. I went to Ecuador, South America, as a kid growing up in the Troubles. In 1996, the Northern Ireland was an absolute, the summer was mental. Drumcree was going, the marches were happening, post vans were burnt, the place was going up in flames. It was absolute bedlam. But I wasn't there. I was in the wilds of Ecuador. And it shaped, in many ways, it shaped one of the reasons why I went to education, because what I saw on that school trip, because it was technically still a school trip, was abject poverty in the third world, as it was then. And it made me change my degree. So a school trip has changed the course of my life. And I'm not exaggerating. A school trip made me think very carefully about the course of actions I was going to take in this world. It took a kid from the back end of Northern Ireland to South America, and what I saw there and what I experienced and what I witnessed there put me on a completely different course, which is why I was volunteering to do again the same thing. And 6 years ago, when I went to the first World Challenge in Nepal, I said exactly that to the parents of the children who were going. You know, this could define you. This could be a life-changing moment. You'll go see the world. It's fantastic when I've had applications come in from pupils I took on those trips from Camp America. I've had kids who have then gone and travelled again, and they've used me as a reference to say, you know, about their leadership skills they had when they were leading that expedition, when they were, you know, budgeting for it. So any of those trips are fantastic, but they are expensive. And my students had to fundraise for practically 2 years. And nothing more satisfying when you see kids from a very impoverished working class background at deindustrialized area of the Midlands saving for 2 years solid, doing 3 and 4 part-time jobs to actually fund themselves on a school trip. But that school trip only ran because of 2 members of staff who were brave enough, silly enough, and probably foolhardy enough to actually do that. And again, the comment in the staff room was, are you taking that child? Are you taking that child? But it's going to happen during your summer holidays. I give up a week of my summer holidays to do it. And when you're looking for volunteers, the volunteer pool started to get very smaller and smaller. It's funny, when people thought that was going to be, you know, sitting on the beach for a couple of days, that was, yeah, I'll do that. But when you're actually confronted with leeches and confronted with, you know, camping out in the wilds of South Asia, that was very, very, very different. So hats off to any member of staff listening. Hats off to anybody who runs a school trip. Hats off to anybody who takes the effort to do it, because it is a thankless, horrible job. But also, I think anybody that does it because they know the power of the school trips, and they know that they are life-defining and life-changing, and hopefully for the right reasons. Unfortunately, there has been situations where in the Nottingham area, I think it was about 8 years ago, a colleagues. They arrived at the ski trip. They arrived late at night. They went for a walk around the ski resort. It was quite dark. One of the member staff slipped and fell and tragically lost his life. What was interesting after that was there was a whole kind of hullabaloo of, oh, teacher having a drink on a school trip. They hadn't at all, but that's what was ran with the media. And it is that situation. I saw Vix Lothian, who is the Green Party spokesperson for education. She, during the strike, one of the strikes, first time she'd taken a school trip. She's a classics teacher and a history and geography teacher, and she had a trip for her first trip, again after COVID, to, I think, Greece and the Parthenon. And she was pictured as part of the course that the children were doing. She was there, pictured. And the Daily Mail ran with that and criticised her. How a teacher on a holiday while the rest are on strike? I was like, no, she's not on holiday. She's on a residential. She's taking children away on a school trip as part of their course. And straight away it was like, oh, yeah, teacher on a jolly. Oh, yeah, let's have fun. And I don't think that the media nor a lot of people out there realise how difficult it is to organise a school trip now. I don't think people realise how difficult it is. So that's what I want to run with. I'll be looking for any feedback or any sort of comments anybody wants to make, whether they agree with me that it is less important now that people are on school trips. And that being, I think it's actually more important. I think with everything going on in the world, I think it is more important. But of course, the environmentalist in me is also thinking, oh, well, should I be encouraging overseas school trips? Don't worry, I have planted 800 trees in the last couple of years. Yes, my school grounds are going to be a little bit of a mini forest. So one of the things I made sure was ethical travel as well. So I have, when I've taken the children away in the last couple of years, I've always ensured that the offsetting happens because, again, I don't want to be criticised. I'm a person of an environmental background, therefore I've had people say that to me. I've had actually people attack me online and go, oh, you're an environmentalist, you're encouraging travel. I'm also a teacher, and I'm also trying to imbue these children who come from very impoverished backgrounds sometimes with a sense of the world. I can't really do that remotely. I can't really do that. Here you go, here's a virtual tour of Nepal complete with leeches. Doesn't work the same. And I've had criticism. I've had people troll me on that. I've had people criticize me on that, call me hypocritical because as someone from an environmental background. Oh gosh, how dare you travel? You're causing climate change. I'm taking children away, and the company I've gone with I've checked out their offsetting. I've checked out their ethical policies, and I am going. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Again, we're restarting our next expedition to Borneo. Next summer, which will again run 1 week into the summer holidays. So we might get a Teachers Talk Radio from the jungle next year, which would be great. So I've got Adam here, and Adam's currently in Portugal.
Yeah, hello from Portugal.
I feel like I couldn't have made this up.
I feel like it's the Eurovision time, isn't it? Hello, it's Adam from Portugal. Hi. I give Brent le poir.
Why are you unique?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. So I've been listening along. I think you've got it pretty spot on. I mean, we're out here with 13 year 12s, year 13s, and they have just yesterday completed 3 weeks worth of work experiences in Portuguese companies. So we've had 9 students at engineering firms and business, and the rest in kind of business administration and accounting companies out here in just north of Porto in Portugal. As I said to the pupils last night, what an unbelievable experience that is to not only get that chunk of work experience done at your age, but also to do it in a different country with different colleagues and different cultures. And they've absolutely excelled while they're out here. So I'm sure the students aren't listening because I think they've gone to bed after me waking them up every morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. But they
last week where I think I heard them in the background. They were singing this army song, which was from Hacksaw Ridge. They kept singing this song all the way long, and I tried to find it. So it's just one kid. You know when kids do that, they sort of sing something. But I thought that they were doing it on purpose. They were tidying their room like a chain gang. one of the other teachers had said, look, get your room sorted out because it smelled of feet. You know, boys' rooms are like, it was a whole boys' room, and it just, you walk in and you got assaulted with, you know, steel, Nike and Adidas, basically, you know, and we're in activity week, so dampness as well. And I think she went in and basically read the riot act and told them, right, that's it, get this tidied, all the rest of it. So they were next door to where I was broadcasting, and you could actually hear them in the background like a chain gang.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, we thought about this question, obviously, because I'm out here, but also off the back of my eldest daughter's parents' evening just before she broke up, where her history teacher made this comment to me, where she said, you know, we haven't been able to do any trips kind of post-COVID. And, you know, I started to calculate the time between kind of COVID and now. And if I think about all the trips that I've done, I was thinking, is that COVID, or is it COVID being used as a, you know, a way to kind of get out of doing trips because maybe she doesn't want to do trips, maybe she doesn't value trips, maybe she's not motivated to do trips. So it really starts to get me thinking about kind of, you know, why do I do trips? I know we talked the other night, Brent, that you know, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I would do this all the time if my, you know, wife and family would allow, and the school would allow me to kind of, you know, do this all the time. I mean, I just think it's, you know, I've always been a big fan of vocational education, and these students today have learned, you know, so much in 3 weeks that's taken us like maybe a year in curriculum time to do. And you know, some of the specifications now are getting quite old anyway. I think 2009 is. So to actually get out, especially in something like business and engineering, when technology is moving so quick, you know, to get out there in the real world and experience this, you know, I always think is kind of a fantastic thing to do. So I did post up on Twitter earlier on in the week, you know, are there less school trips and enrichments in post-COVID? And we had 37 people replied to that, with an 89% saying yes. So there obviously is something going on. You know, whether it's because after a kind of year, you know, not doing trips, people have maybe they could have lost confidence. They could have just.
I would agree with you on that. I think that is actually. I'll confess, there is the history trip, which I should run as the head of history. And I've actually had the students say to me, you know, sir, you know, my brother went on the battlefields trip with you and Mr. McNally, why haven't you done it? And I honestly, I just felt like saying, they don't have the time. I'm scared. I'm genuinely scared to take responsibility for that trip, because it's a lot of responsibility. I know I'm genuine. And whereas I
think if you can be honest, Brent, and just go through, because I feel the same sometimes. I feel that kind of burden of pressure does weigh heavy, but I still think in my head, I'm able to still kind of swing the difference. But what are your concerns about a trip?
Parents.
Okay.
Completely demanding parents who want everything their way, people who want the provision of their child met, you know, who are unreasonable. Sorry, but some of them are unreasonable. The complaints, I suppose, the sheer volume of bureaucracy and paperwork. Which, I'm going to be honest, you've known me long enough to know that I'm not really a paperwork type of guy. It's not my thing.
Well,
I didn't go into
I don't want to hit the word Brexit with you, Brent. Maybe that's.
I've already mentioned it. I've already mentioned it. No, that's not. I'm not really a Brexit fan either.
Can I tell you that the Erasmus scheme that obviously got cancelled, and we're now on the Turing scheme here. My goodness, the paperwork is astronomical. We have been chased. There are at least 10 reports that need to be filled in by the students and the employer. And then there's all sorts of other things going on in terms of questionnaires and feedback forms on top of that. And that is quite, I mean, I think some of the employers are going, what, another one? And another one? And it's unbelievable. I sent you a picture the night, didn't I, of the weight of it. That I've had to not only take out to Portugal with me, but I've obviously now got to make sure it's filed and ordered and, you know, sent off. So I'm scanning that in reception at the minute. trying to get that off to the to the right people, so we get our funding. But it's absolutely incredible, the paperwork, the administration of these things. I don't know where that's come from.
Well, it's just bureaucracy expanding to meet the needs of the ever-expanding bureaucracy. But it was people's, I'm not saying expectations. People used to trust you.
Yeah.
And it's always a mutually trust. And I think it goes back to the trust between the profession and parents is not what it used to be. But even the trust between the parents, the kids' education, everything else. I think there's a lot going on with toilets and vaping and everything else and behavior. That worries me because I go on these trips. It's a chicken and the egg. Here's the horrible side of it. I still go on trips, although I don't organize them, because you build a better relationship with kids, and you build memories. It seems I'm going away with my own children. Of course, because it's the same principle, and that's why, when I get parents, taking a child out the last week of term to go on a holiday, I always feel a bit sorry for some parents who do genuinely take their children on a life-changing holiday, and you go, fair play to them. And if their attendance is 95%, 97%, then yeah, it's when their attendance is 75% and they're taking them out for a second holiday, you're going, hi guys, come on. And they're the first to, to have sort of their demands met. And that's the problem, is you just don't seem to be able to satisfy people these days. People just want everything.
Yeah.
My child doesn't get, I had a situation where a child wasn't happy with the group that they had recently in our activity week. And I'm like, I felt like saying, suck it up. Get on with it. You are here to learn to get along with everybody else. Am I pandering to your needs? Hell no, I am not. I'm not here to give you what you want. I don't care how much money you pay for. You're here to learn, and that's the problem.
Brent, I love your rants. I absolutely, sorry, mate. I just love your rants.
You stopped me mid-flow. I was about to get to the point as well.
Come on.
You can't handle the truth.
Sorry, Tom. I'm not sat next to him. I normally squeeze his leg at this point to try and.
Mate, that's a privilege that many of us will never have.
Oh, what?
I think you need to
stop, mate.
Get some sponsors.
Oh, he wants to sponsor. Oh, yeah.
Oh, brilliant, Adam. I love having you on. That's good. Bring him into line.
We are currently sponsored by Calm Down. Calm Down. We're sponsored by Modern Foreign Languages, Edexcel Pearson, who have come up with a fantastic, it's perfect for this show, actually, have come up with a fantastic GCSE, which is more in line with modern day. And I will actually get to use that when I go to France, when I trial it with my young little children who are 7 and 5. Actually, 8 and 5. No, 7. She's coming 8 next month. They can't even get the age of my own child. 7.
No one's listening to you, are they?
They don't. Do you know what? I spent the day with my 2 children. I'd happily go back to school in the morning. Honestly, it's exhausting. I don't know how primary school teachers do it. Younger children are absolutely exhausting, and they're never happy too as well. That's why you don't want to do school trips. Anyway, Pearson's French, Modern Foreign Languages in French, and what they've done is they've updated it in line with modern take and make it more accessible to our students, and that's ready to launch in 2024, which is just next year. And of course, I fully think that Modern Foreign Languages, because it's not just, of course, French, it's a modern foreign language, and you need to translate French into the mother language, which increases their ability and their confidence in not only speaking a foreign language, but also communicating their own language, which is something that is very, very important. And learning a language is always opening doors to travel, which is something I hope many of our children do, but sustainably. And obviously, if they do Pearson's Edexcel, they'll be able to do that a lot more confidently. There we go. Is that okay, Tom? Did I work that in nicely?
Loving that.
Très bien.
Très bien. Oh, so, that sounds a bit like you would call it. What do you call them? Only fools and horses, Bless him. He definitely wasn't Pearson's Edexcel, was he? But Del Boy's French. Anyway, where was I before Tom just threw a spanner in the works? Children these days. Oh God, I'm getting old. I am getting old. But why do I not want to do trips?
Yeah.
I just genuinely, I don't want the hassle. It's just another thing on top of another thing, on top of another thing. And I'm caught between, I know how amazing they are, and I'm happy to be a subservient on a trip, which I have been recently. And I looked at two of my senior colleagues. I had a senior colleague and a head of year. And of course, they had the responsibilities, when it came down to it. And heavy wears the crown, because there were decisions that had to be made and calls that had to be made. And they had to make the calls to parents. And I was so happy and glad that I wasn't the leader on the trip, because I was sitting there thinking, well, every decision they had to make in real time on that trip had to be well thought through. But it was a team effort, and I went there with a couple of colleagues who I trust and have known for, one for 19 years, one for 16 years, and another who's a fantastic new colleague after even a couple of years. But we were a good team, and that comes down to it as well. You know who you go on a residential with is important, because I've got to know lifelong friends through going on residentials, not just the children, but I find it fantastic to actually get to know my colleagues, because you've really, once you've shared a room with one of your colleagues, because that happens in residentials when you have to share rooms and you realize how much of a warthog somebody snores like, then you sort of really get to know, people. And that's,
I think you should name.
well, but that's the thing. Some of the best memories I've had that have sustained me in dark, cold nights is like, the dark, cold nights at Stoke, on a Wednesday night, as they say, that's when, you're a Premier League footballer. It's the same. How do you know you're a teacher? When on those dark, cold nights, what sustains you in the profession? I think Tom put that up and says, what's one of the secrets to longevity and sustainability with anybody who stays in education? Fun. Just fun. You have to have some fun. You have to have something to look forward to. You have to have something to break the monotony. And, residentials and school trips can be just as fun for you as they can for the kids. But are they as much fun as they used to be? Are they, now just so sanitized and so safe and so sort of double checked and triple checked and bureaucratic that the fun? And I'm going to sound like an Irving Welsh novel here, The Beach. Are we reaching that point where even traveling around the world now is so much fun? Not as much fun. Maybe I'm showing my age here, because in the time that I traveled around the world, there was no credit cards, there was no mobile phones. It was just basically send a smoke signal up from my parents 12,500 miles away and say, your son's in Australia and he's gone. Now it's kind of like you go to a backpacking hostel and everybody's got a laptop and they're talking to their friends at home. They don't talk to each other any longer. But it's the same as our kids. They don't talk to each other any longer. They communicate with electronic devices. So is it something in the future that residential trips will be some of those things that we look back on like a carry-on? It was one of those things we used to do at school. Wow, you went on residential trips. Yeah, we just do a virtual one now. Are they something that is going to die? That's the big question. Are they going to make a comeback after COVID? Or are they, like everything else, just going to just dissipate into and say that's something we used to do in school?
Because I do think it depends on the culture of the centre. The school that I'm at the minute is very into this, and if I just think about the last 2 months, we have had teachers and staff in Congo. We've had staff out in South Africa with students. We've got these students out with me in Portugal at the moment. And there is a group of students who have just arrived in Zambia doing a construction project. So I think there is a way to do it, but it does need a big kind of cultural shift. We essentially have a department to basically organise the trips. So in terms of us, I'm the trip leader out here at the minute. In terms of what I need to do, obviously I need to be present and I'm fully briefed on everything. But there's a team that kind of has already done the recce, done a lot of the kind of risk assessment and everything else prior to my visit. And then what we're doing is we're kind of then briefed in-house and then trained on anything that we need to do before we go out. And I know for a lot of schools that's just not doable. But there are lots of schools that do it, but it's just a matter of kind of having that kind of culture really around that we are going to make this a priority, and I'm really fortunate the centre I'm at the minute is making it their priority, to do this. And
no, I think you're very, very blessed and lucky, because everything now what we have is on the staff member, to do all the checks.
Yeah.
And there are systems in place, but the support bureaucracy is just frustrating. And the thing is, so you get something wrong, you just get people assuming that you know what you're doing. Oh, have you been trained on the system? What system are you talking about? Oh, you've had a half an hour training on some system. You basically so unworldly.
Again, I think that's just cultural in terms of, that is just a blame culture in the centre. And that is just people kind of management, not really. And it's one of the things kind of just to slightly dovetail. I know we sort of talk about it a bit later on about this workload report that's come out.
Yeah.
The centres that are doing really well on workload is when SLT and leadership are taking a much more active role in other areas of the school life, like curriculum planning, like trips. And really being supportive. So there is evidence that it is happening in the centres. It's just I think maybe as teachers we need to maybe better call out management when it's not working, and a way of almost feeding that back, because it can be done and it is there in place. We have a lot of those policies that are in place on those and that workload plan. We have the no email policy after a certain time. We have all these in place.
But who started that culture? Because that's the thing. I mean, who's has that come from? The ethos of the school, the education establishment, their aims, objectives.
Well, ultimately, it comes down to like anything. It comes from the top, doesn't it? If there's somebody at the top that really does want to do it, then it happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, I suppose, because ultimately it's their sign off, isn't it? Because they have to say yes to any trip, don't they? Because that's, you go to your head teacher ultimately, or now if it's the executive head teacher who then sometimes goes to the trust, and that's where I've had issues sometimes where we've had to not talk to the head teacher, we've had to talk to some nameless bureaucrat in an office somewhere, God knows where in Derbyshire, and we explained to them what we're trying to do, and that's when we did the World Challenge. And the beautiful thing with it is that that organisation takes all that sort of responsibility. We're only there really as staff members to as make up the numbers. We're not in charge. The company's in charge. So we kind of outsource the residential to a company, which exactly what happened when I went in 1996. And that's why I'm happy to do that, because it's their responsibility. Exactly what you're saying there is that's a residential you can go with, because that's a residential where you're partaking. But that's not a residential where you are the person who's completely responsible, you're liable, you've done all the checks, and therefore your head is on that.
Well,
which is a bit,
we've done it as a team. There's like 6 staff involved. There's another person who kind of oversees all of this with a company called, I can't remember the called now, but there's a company then that kind of contributes to that. Out here, then it becomes more of a team effort, but with the company out here, it's all about kind of a support network. I think that's how it works when it works well. Is that then nobody is sat here thinking, oh my goodness, I'm just here on my own, and if anything happens, what am I gonna do? We've got, I'm involved here with a kind of on what, so you talk about, we might talk about technology and mobile phones later, but we've set up a kind of Portugal WhatsApp group with staff at base, where somebody's always active at school on that chat. We've got a active group with the company, including the reception here, so I can quickly kind of contact them if I need to about anything. So it's about a bit more of a collaborative support with this, and so all I've done here really is be like I would be at school, like a teacher really. I'm not.
What was the numbers of people volunteering? Because obviously you're giving up a portion of your free time. So what was the meanest response? What was the meanest response to that, of like, well, you're a teacher, oh gosh, you're losing some of your 6 weeks holidays when you're a teacher?
I think she, but we also share the I guess it's an ideology, isn't it, around vocational education and what's important. And I want also to be going to show and posting stuff back to my children about people in the workplace in a foreign country whilst they're at school, because I want them to be demanding that from their teachers as well.
So you're going there to learn as well?
Of course, yeah. We're all learning tonight. Last 2 nights, we've done a kind of like a Portuguese lessons straight after work. Which we I've thrown my hat in there and said, I'm probably going to be worse than anybody here, but I've gone with it to kind of show, willing that I'm learning as well, that I'm a lifelong learner.
So you went to Porto. You went to a football match, didn't you?
I've not been to a football match while I'm here now. I've been to. I don't know. There's something about it for me on these trips. Anywhere in Europe, churches are just phenomenal, aren't they? In Spain and Portugal.
Did you go into church?
Yeah, I've been into plenty of churches. Yeah.
Wow.
Just bear with him.
Oh, here comes a crisis on a school trip. We're live. that could be an artification of life.
Yeah.
You back?
Yeah. Sorry, there's the students are just paying for a trip tomorrow. I'm just trying to sort that out while I'm getting on the phone.
You multitasking.
I've got a lot. I'm uploading pictures to this kind of school site from today's presentation. I'm talking to you, and I'm counting euros for a trip tomorrow.
What's the trip to?
We're going to the local town, which is Braga.
Oh yeah, Braga's got its own football team. Yeah, I know where you are.
I've got its own football team, yeah. But,
yeah.
They just want a kind of day out in the city, so we're just sorting that out.
And how, that's 17, 18 then, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I think most. There's a couple of year 13s. There might even be 19 actually.
So we had the conversation about substances and stuff like that. How's that going down with the behaviour and the discipline? Do they have a code of conduct? Because taking that age away is tricky in itself. I mean, they're easier because they're managing themselves. But...
Yeah. So again, I won't mention the name of the company here, but they've also been very good and very strict here. So there's not just us here. There's schools from there's colleges and undergraduate students also staying on site from Italy, Austria, Switzerland and Germany here at the minute. And there is a very strict code in terms of being on site at a certain time. And again, they've met the parents with us over Teams before. So we've had a kind of good chat with the company as well as us, as well as the parents and as well as the students. They signed a code of conduct before they came. And again, that didn't come from the school. So maybe this is a bit more important thing. The code of conduct didn't come from the school. It came from the company out here. It kind of looked like they're signing something with the place that they're staying at as well. So I think it's kind of just a bit different.
So there are consequences to them breaking the rules. Then is what we're saying. There are going into it, with expectations and consequences.
Yes, they would essentially they've had to pay a deposit to the accommodation, and they lose that money if they break the rules here.
Oh, I like the sound of all that. That sounds very well organised. How expensive? You don't have to say it, but is it expensive for what it is? Because that's the other thing.
Well, it's through the Turing scheme. So
completely through the Turing scheme.
Completely through the Turing scheme, yeah. So I don't think that there's any cost at all. That's why it's so keen to get all the paperwork done. That's the only.
Wow.
That's the only pressure.
I think the advice to give to anybody then is get onto the Turing scheme. Then, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's been brilliant.
But that used to be the Erasmus. That cheering scheme is the equivalent of what was the Erasmus program, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So there is a subtle sort of benefit to what's happened. That's because that is one of the things that they said they would ensure post-Brexit, that they would ensure that there was some exchange schemes. So fair play, that is one of the things that has been saved, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't been saved. They've just had to kind of re-establish it.
Be interested to know. I'm interested to know the numbers of what was on the cheering scheme to compare to what Erasmus was, and then I suppose you're it's not really a fair comparison because you're dealing with two different times as well. Because it's hard to get a read on comparing different times and saying, well, is Brexit? Is it COVID? Is it technology? Because here's the other thing as well: is in the digital world we live in, there's less need, the same as travel. People are working from home now. Maybe residentials are losing their kind of pull because you can now, and the other thing is you look at parents taking their children away. Children now go on a lot more exotic holidays than what I used to get. So a residential for me was something a bit more amazing comparison to, going camping down in Wicklow, which was ours. Oh, here we go again with the camping tent down in Wicklow. What I'm saying is that children now have a greater variety of choice. School trips aren't, I suppose, as glamorous maybe as what they used to be, because school trips used to be something that was maybe a once in a lifetime. I'm just hypothesizing as to another reason why potentially school trips aren't being run as much, because everybody's suggesting, you said 89% of people, and anecdotally I can feel it, that there is a lot less people going on school trips for, I think, all of those reasons, that the risk, the recruitment retention crisis, Brexit, the cost of living crisis, the fact that children now go on more exotic holidays, why they need to go on a school trip, curriculum changes, less coursework demanded. So all of those do start to add up into less trips. But yet the irony is that what you're saying and what your evidence is, well, he's just popped off, bye Adam, is that school trips are something that is intrinsically good for children, and yet we seem to be doing less of them. I'll go to our sponsors now. If Adam's going to come back, maybe he's got something to deal with. I know Paul's going to pop on later on as well. He's just dealing with something. I've got let's see who else I've got. I've got Noreen in here. I've got VAR Loyal. I've got let's see, that's yes, and Paul, my good friend from Merseyside, Paul Falls, and he's in here as well. And we have a hand up from Tom.
That's me saying I'm here.
Oh, I can't forget about you, Tom. God knows if you can't be forgotten by. You've been winding people up enough recently. I mean, goodness gracious. I think you're trying to start Twitter storm. Your inflammatory tweets. Love it. You're just like me. You're such a Socratic individual. Honestly, Tom, why don't you just go away for 6 weeks? I feel like defending you now. I can't believe people are criticizing a guy who runs Teachers Talk Radio for running Teachers Talk Radio through the 6 weeks holidays, because one of the things we often say as teachers is we actually don't always take 6 weeks off, do we? So we don't take 6 weeks off, and not even Teachers Talk Radio is going to take 6 weeks off. So I'm be popping in and out of the next couple of weeks. But we'll go to our sponsor, and the sponsor is Pearson's Modern Foreign Languages 2024 specification, which has taken into account updated language, new language models, and is more accessible to the students because it's using bang up-to-date information. A lot less than what I was when French was at school, when we had the guys with the beret caps with a cigarette hanging out called Gaston, who were taking us to the horse meat butcher's shop. I don't know why my children going to France tomorrow aren't going to need to know tournée à gauche to the horse meat butcher shop. So Pearson's Edexcel is a lot more contemporary, bang up to date, and that's their new Edexcel specification ready to go in 2024, which is next year. Also, if you are interested, you could become one of our Teachers Talk Radio disc jockeys. Not that we play any music. You could ask me to sing. I have sang before in Teachers Talk Radio. I did break into song last week on my residential. The kids recorded it and they're uploading it. So you'll probably find that somewhere on TikTok by next week. It'll probably go viral. Crazy Irishman doing singing. I think it was Stand By Me with Yes, stand by me at the top of my voice in an old house in the middle of Wales. So that's Teachers Talk Radio. You want to come and join us? We are a hive mind. You will be assimilated and you will become part of the Borg, where your uniqueness will be added to the hive mind. It is Teachers Talk Radio. So the second thing we were going to have a chat about was the workload and this idea of whether we take the workload as altogether, i.e. we take free time on PPAs as one a day, or whether we gather them all up and then we have a day off in hybrid working. So this conversation about whether we have how we get our free time and how we, as educators, how we can work more flexibly in line with modern working practices. And again, this is in the backdrop of the recruitment and retention crisis, because in the world that we live in today, when people have dual income households and the career that is teaching is difficult as it is, we're seeing a lot more individuals who are, well, let's just be honest, leaving the teaching profession because they don't feel it can fit around the lifestyle. And that lifestyle is that, different working patterns, raising families and different, and childcare. The cost of childcare is absolutely extortionate, and the government need to sort that out. So it's just not working. When you see other professions which allow career breaks, I know Australia, after 5 years service, they give you 3 months off. The burnout rate in the UK education system, especially more so England, is very high. We know that 40% of people, 40,000 people leaving last year. We can see people leaving within 5 years. And again, one of the reasons they cite that is the bureaucracy, the workload, and just the archaic nature of how we are expected to work in teaching, which ironically fits back into the previous topic, which was the residentials, because you're having to work the way we have to work sometimes in the way that we have to work, and then you're then volunteering to go off on your half term. And I know that some of my colleagues do a ski trip to Canada, but they do it during the half term. So the February half term, they're out skiing with the kids, and I've often wondered how knackered they must be come April time, because they've gone through January, February half term, they've done a residential, then they go through April, and if Easter is late, I said that to one of my colleagues last year, they were absolutely on their knees because they'd gone pretty much January till April when Easter was, and they hadn't had a break, and they're 5 days a week. I know some of my colleagues who are now doing part-time. I've seen a couple who are basically saying they do their life admin on their one day off so that they have their weekend. That is a conversation I've had with my wife recently. For longevity of my career, doing 20 years in teaching, I think now that I've reached that stage in my career and my life, that I want my weekend back, because one day of the weekend is designated preparation, marking, planning, schoolwork. And that means on a Sunday, the hefty chunk of my Sunday is pretty much spent doing teacher work. And I feel guilty as a parent, I feel guilty as a husband, I feel guilty as a father, that my children don't see as much of their father because he is working, because that's the nature of the job. And my wife doesn't resent it in a way, because she knew she married a teacher when she met me. And that's part and parcel of what the sacrifice we make as teachers. But for others, that's just too much. And therefore, this suggestion that if you were able to store up your free periods and your PPAs, and then have a day where you're not in school, for some individuals, that actually might help save their longevity in their career, because that may deem. Now, I don't know if that would work for me, because theoretically speaking, I'm a bit of one of those people that whittles time in school. I'm terribly unproductive sometimes. I will admit to sometimes having conversations with people when I should be doing some marking. And you get the couple of types of teachers, don't you? You get the ones who are so disciplined that they eat their lunch at their desk, they leave at 3:15 because they've done all their marking, all their work, and everything in school. And I don't know how they do this. But they do it because they don't go to the staff room. They do it because they're extremely disciplined individuals. Hats off to them. They come in very early in the morning, get everything planning done. We know the type, and literally, they are efficient, and literally bang, 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 and out the door they go, and they seem to know what they're doing. I will admit to being slightly inefficient in school, slightly sort of distractory. I mean, if I'm in the staff workroom and at the photocopying machine, there'll be random conversations with people. But I've always enjoyed that as part of my workplace, because that's a happy workplace. You talk to your colleagues, you find out lots of stuff. You know, that's the person I am. I've never been one to sit at a desk and do my marking. I do that after school. I tend to, when everybody else has gone home, I put my headphones on, I put my SCDC in, and sometimes I take the headphones off, and only the person that can hear me is the cleaner when she can hear me singing Back in Black down the corridor. Because if there are people around, I'm terrible for it. If there are people around in school, I just get distracted. I'm just like one of those kids in class that can't shut up. You know the type, that's me. And there are, I'm sure, some of you like that. Whereas this idea of storing up all of those PPAs for one day, I don't know if I would use it that way. I don't know if that would work for me. Because I, be honest with you, I need sometimes a break. You know, if I had a 5-period day, 5-period day, 5-period day, 5-period day, 5-period day, 5-period day, 5-period, and then one day where no periods, that 4 days intense without sort of breaks, I don't know if that actually is advantageous, because there are times when you are staring down the barrel of 30 kids in year 7, 30 kids in year 8, 30 kids in year 9, and then your GCSE class, and then another 30 kids come in. And imagine, you know, you have that 4 days solid, 20 solid periods. That you know, I'm sure anybody who works secondary would agree with me. When you see your primary colleagues and know what you're thinking, you're going to go, wow, but we do that all the time. You know, we stay with our kids. Yes, you do, and I don't know how you do it. I honestly don't know how you do it. You have my utter respect. Secondary is more intense in some ways. More kids come in and you have to go do. You don't get to relax as much because everything's a bit more stressed out. You know, kids come in, you got to set them up, and you got to bang, you got to get the tasks done as quick as possible. I think the way secondary is so inefficient compared to primary. You know, so inefficient. Just when you get some progress done with a child, the bell goes. It's one of the problems of education, and kids have to take themselves out 5 days, 5 different lessons and 5 different subjects. And the same with you. You've got I can go from last year I was doing physics and English and history. So I could go from, doing a lesson on Shakespeare to then doing a lesson on specific heat capacity, to then doing a lesson on the other side of the school on the Holocaust, all within a matter of 3 hours. And trying to put your head around that is the same as, suppose, the children themselves. They come into a classroom, there's a very different teacher, and there's a very different setup, and there's a very different, set of subjects. So primary, I get that, in some ways you have that time sometimes with the same children that you can get caught up with stuff. And maybe there is a bit of, I'm not saying downtime, but you do have, I think, a very different way of working than secondary, because secondary is more bang. It's like you're running 100 meters, stop, running 100 meters, stop, 100 meters, stop, 100 meters, stop. And it's a bit like that, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, quite intense. And I know I come home after a 5-period day and I'm absolutely wiped. I'm literally, physically and mentally exhausted. And I know that Tom put a tweet out recently, and he said about what would you do at the first couple of days after the summer holidays. And literally, my wife has been married to me that long, 13, 12 years now, and she knows that not to plan anything on the first weekend that I'm off school, because my body just literally just go boom, and I crash. And physically and mentally, I think I'm only nearly there now where I'm relaxed. And she even remarked to me the other day and says, "Oh gosh, you've been listening quite a lot." I'm not the best listener in the world. I'm a terrible husband sometimes, but well, she's next door. She's not listening. But she's just, "Oh, you're listening more." I'm like, that's because I've not been at school, and my head isn't buzzing with what happens at school. I'm not exhausted. I have the time to. How was your day? How was your day? And those who are married to teachers know what they mean about that, because we come home and we're almost like, I feel like sometimes locking myself in a room for a half an hour and just basically decompressing. It's an absolute assault. So workload, if they can come up with ways that work for different people, I think they should offer options. And for some individuals, that option of having all your PPAs at one may actually work. For others, it may not. But that in itself, even to start the conversation of, let's think about how people work, and how best people work is not how teaching's always operated, because much like the children, it's interesting, we're in child-centered education, but we're not in teacher-centered education, are we? Because we're just uniform. It's funny that we're expected to conform to expectations, and yet the children aren't. But yet children are many versions of us. I can go on like the children sometimes. I am like the children sometimes. This is one of the reasons why I get on with the children, because I'm pretty much like them. And we are, because our brains are wired like them as well, a bit more mature. But, we're still human beings. We still get exhausted. The children get exhausted. When kids try and say to me, oh, you know what? Hold on a second here. I need to go to the toilet, sir. I'm like, I'm 19 years in teaching. I've never once left the class to go to the toilet. So we need to be looked at as the same way that everybody else is looked at, not as an infant resource that we need to be managed. Paul's popped in. So, hello, Paul.
Hello.
How are you, my friend?
I'm not bad. I was phoning up for a request. If you could sing Killing Me Softly by the Fugees. I just thought it'd be a very good teacher type song.
Oh, well, there is the original by Roberta Fleck, isn't it, as well?
Oh, there you go. Even better.
Why do I suddenly feel like the Love Actually? Because that's Love Actually, isn't it? When he has to get up and sing "Killing Me Softly," doesn't he?
Does he?
I love that movie. I can never look at another nativity play without seeing an octopus.
Oh, that is a quality costume. There you are. I tell you what, that's another space that you could do another time.
Well, I played Joseph in my nativity play. I can still remember my nativity play, and Tanya Mulligan was Mary, and Joseph and Mary had a little kissing scene as well. God, I love the 80s. Weren't they amazing? Now you imagine the safeguarding on that one, but goodness gracious me. Back in the 80s, it was like Bluey. So what was your residentials or workload, Paul?
Well, I've got a residential story.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centered French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
Oh, I'm going to sit back and enjoy this. Go on.
I'm like you more recently in terms of residentials. I'm not the one pushing to do them, just because of time and because of liability and all sorts. And I know how much they mean to the kids after they've done them. We had our year sixes leavers assembly, obviously a couple of weeks ago, and they all spoke about their favourite moment. I think almost every moment was from their residential to Ullswater or something like that. So they are valuable. I took my class with another teacher, so it's like a year 1-2 class. It was of about 18 kids, and it was somewhere in Cheshire, and we did. It was kind of a Vikings / or Romans type thing that we did. Kids enjoyed themselves, They were given little tools to dig around and make, what and dab something, wattle and dab or something like that on walls. So they got messy and they absolutely loved it. So at the end of we were only there one night, 2 days. So after we'd, got them all in and read them the story and got into their beds and everything else. And everyone had, there was bunk beds, right? And parents knew this before. So we had lots of things saying, don't let my child lie on the top bunk. Don't let them go on the top bunk. So we didn't let anyone go on the top bunks because there was enough space. Kids settle down, teachers get together, nice cup of tea. We're all knackered as well. So we're thinking, we'll just be a little bit and then we'll go to our beds as well. One of the kids runs in, hands covered in blood, saying, Jamie's fallen out of bed.
Oh.
Now, Jamie is the same height and width as a meter stick. And he was not on the top bunk, but somehow he managed to roll out of bed and smack his head on the bed frame of the bed next to him. Unbelievably. No idea how he did it. So one teacher goes in, brings him out. He's only got a small cranium anyway, but this was like a second head on his head. It just, the size of this lump was unbelievable. And there was just blood everywhere.
Oh.
And the poor kid was in shock. So this is, what would it be? 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night on what day was it? It was on a Tuesday evening, I think it was. And we know what the state of ambulances and stuff like that is. We did everything that we could to make him comfortable and ice and all sorts. I think it was after an hour and a half, a volunteer paramedic turned up to assess the situation, then to phone the ambulance and say whether we needed it or not. That's what sort of state we were in. It was just absolutely horrendous.
And the irony is, you deemed the bottom bunk to be safe.
I know. Oh, you couldn't have made it up with him, honest to God. And so he said, oh yeah, he needs to go to hospital. But obviously we came on the coach with the kids. We've no car or anything else. And the volunteer paramedic can't give us a lift to the hospital. So they're not going to send an ambulance. The ambulance pay for a taxi for one of us to go with little Jamie to Chester Hospital, while the other two staff would obviously stay with the rest of the kids. So who do you think was assigned taxi duty?
No.
Oh yeah. So poor Jamie, who's absolutely exhausted, trying to keep him awake, because apparently you meant to keep him awake. And I get in this taxi, and me and Jamie sit off for hours waiting for him to get his noggin checked. And it was just horrendous. The saving grace of it all was that actually of the three staff, one of the staff was the actual head teacher. And I think if she wasn't there, we would have done everything that we could have done, but there just would have been so much after interrogation. Do you know what I mean? It would just
it's that kind of, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? Did you do that? Yeah, and mealtime they saw all the decisions there and were part of it. So I suppose the locus of control was good that they were there. Then they could see that all the I's and T's were crossed. But it does make you double check yourself, don't you? You think what we did. You doubt yourself, don't you? We did say to the children to be and you read through the risk assessments again, don't you, to make sure everything's airtight and that there's nothing coming back on you, because that's all you probably have that thing of like, what's little Jimmy's parents like? Are they the type to make a big issue out of this? Are they the type to turn around and go, oh, little Jimmy fell out of bed, because you do get some that are like, oh, little Jimmy fell out of bed, or you get others going like, how dare you? Was nobody watching my, why didn't you put a pillow in the, you just don't know what you're going to get, don't you?
To be fair to Jamie's mum, I mean, she was never the greatest at being available. She'd actually recently changed her mobile phone number. So the detail that we had on all the details of the kids was wrong. So we had to improvise and get in touch with another family member through another way. It was just one of those things as, what on earth do we do now? Because we couldn't get hold of her at first. So she didn't complain. I don't think she had many rights to complain after we couldn't get her on hold of her on the phone. But it did end out all okay in the end. And Jamie, even though he missed the second day, of the trip, he was fine and loved coming into school on the Thursday or Friday, I think, with still a massive bump on his head. And
but
he loved all
come
the
when he leaves,
attention.
it's what you're saying. When he leaves, it'll be, remember that time you fell out of bed? it becomes a legendary story now, doesn't it? Like, and I've got legendary stories of standing out at 12 o'clock at night, dressing gowns, and the kids, in dressing gowns, because one of the children, let's just say, had a telegram for a number 2, and decided that they would then spray deodorant to get rid of said foul odor, and thus set the fire alarms off. The rumor went round of, it wasn't that it was the spray that set the fire alarm off. It was the noxious gas from said child's posterior that set off. We all have. I mean, if you were to draw up a kind of one of those and write a book of funny stories from school trips, it'd probably be a bestseller, wouldn't it?
It'd be a crack at that. Yeah,
it wouldn't it? I once had a bunch of children. And obviously, I've always had every once in a while a child who does accents, and of course I can fall foul of it. So I my accent's not the most difficult in the world to do, but I had one student who was very good at doing me, very, very, very good, to such a point I was losing my rag with these year 9s. Back in the day when you could shout at children without consequences, because now these days it's like restorative justice. Back in the good old days, you could go up the corridor and basically, put the fear of God into them. You will go home. Your parents will be called. Next time I have to come up this corridor, you are going home. And they had Sergeant Major Poland basically unleashed, and he was not happy because it was 11 o'clock at night and these kids weren't going to bed. And so I came up at about 11:15 thinking they're all going to be asleep. They've had Sergeant Major Poland. So knocking the doors, heard some of the kids talking. It's like, what's going on? And they're packing. He told us to go home. I'm like, what do you mean told you to go home? That was 15 minutes ago. You're back asleep. No. And the one room that wasn't packing, there was just sniggering from the kids. Until I says, why aren't you guys? And he just gave himself away. He says, it's me, sir. He says, show me what you did. And he went up to the corridor and he literally toned everything absolutely perfect. I went downstairs to my colleagues and I dragged them downstairs and says, would you show them what you just showed to me? And they were in absolute stitches. And I should have punished them, but I couldn't. How could I punish them? He absolutely completely destroyed me. I had to tip my hat to the kid and go, but that's it. That became a thing. Every year he produced a video. And he even had a website, Make Poland History, back in the good old days when it was Make Poverty Histories, like 2005, 2006. And again, this kid reconnected with me about 10 years later. And what's the first thing he said? Do you remember that time? Yeah, remember that time you ripped off my accent? How you doing? And he's doing stand-up. I'm thinking, of course he's doing stand-up, because he was doing stand-up. He's doing stand-up in year 9 when he was absolutely completely destroying his teacher by pretending. And that's the power of it, isn't it? That story then becomes he fell out of bed, and luckily, fingers crossed, of course, that's the thing, anything that happens, you panic, don't you? You try not to panic, but inside your stomach is churning. I'm sure that's what the feeling you get, isn't it? Your stomach is churning, like, what could happen here? And it's somebody else's children, isn't it? It's one of your own children. It's fine.
Gosh. Exactly. And the thing is, in September, I've got Jamie again in my class, also along with his twin sisters as well. So if we are to do a residential somewhere, I will be packing them in bubble wrap.
And they will the pillow under their bed.
They will sleep on the floor with nothing around them whatsoever.
Oh man! I heard it last week. We had an incident with the marshmallow. And it was basically kids having a campfire, a marshmallow, and one of the children just walked past another child with a marshmallow, slightly brushed them with it. The marshmallow was stuck. And then the child did what the most instinct would be to rub it off. And then they rubbed the molten part. Oh, that was it. They didn't complain. They just went, I've got marshmallow. We started rubbing it. We're like, stop. They actually rubbed the really hot part. That was a hospital. Again, the child was absolutely, completely stoic. Was brilliant. Parent was wrong. Two colleagues went, and this is Wales. Wales NHS is fantastic. Straight into the hospital, no problem whatsoever. Parent was brilliant, but we were then having to do write up the report afterwards, going like, what mitigation is that? And you're like, it's just one of those things. There was nothing you could have done. Children just walking past each other with a marshmallow. And you're going, oh God, and we're all going, oh God, we're going to get it when we go home, aren't we? We're going to get it. But that's the fear of it, is the fear of something. There are taking children on a trip is a risk, isn't it? And as long as there's everything in a risk, isn't it? I mean, every day is a risk, but as long as you've done everything to mitigate those circumstances as much as possible. But yeah, it just shows you that even when you tell them to sleep in the bottom bunk, they still have an accident.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to have second thoughts about whether Jamie's two sisters are going to be on the residential this year. But we'll see. Maybe we'll do it in some sort of soft play area or something instead.
Oh gosh, the soft play areas. I mean, have you seen the children in soft play areas?
Oh, I don't mean like a jelly beans. I mean something where it's really timid.
But isn't the thing though, and it's risk and reward. And yeah. I'm terrible for it myself. I in my own life, I'm a risk taker. I've always been. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've fallen out of a tree. It was funny when the kids were climbing last week, and they were like, "It's high up there." I'm like, "What would happen if you fell from that far?" I'm like, your age, I fell that far. Put my tooth through my top lip. You'd be all right. You'd be fine. And the looks they're giving me, like, "Are you all right?" So I'm like, you're fine. Don't worry about it. And the instructors have been looking at me going like, "You fell from that height?" Yeah, I fell from that height at their age. How many bones have you broken? About 7, 6, yeah. A couple of ankles. Because that was the thing, and I'm going to sound my age there. I went swimming in the sea, you know what I mean, when I was 7 or 8 years old. Yes, my older brother was there. I mean, I sort of equate my childhood to an episode of Stand By Me with River Phoenix and those guys going looking for a dead body. These days now, they can't go 5 minutes without a text message saying, "Are you all right?" You know what I mean? Yeah. We were told that we were kids. Oh, stranger danger. Never get into a car full of strangers. No, there's none of that. I just think maybe I'm getting very old and very cranky, but I think health and safety is important. Absolutely. But maybe we've become too, as you say, you just hit the nail on the head, haven't you? Maybe the next time I'll go with even safer. The kids will sleep on the floor, even when you've mandated the kids to not, go on the bunk beds. They fall over, and yet that's going to happen. But it's that fear, isn't it? And I think that's one of the things. But that's brilliant, Paul. That's absolutely brilliant. Even when you've done everything right.
I know you can't. You can only do what you can, can't you? But
what's the best trip you've done then? What's the one that you say to yourself, if you had all the staff, all the money, what would you at primary? Because I'll tell you what I think at secondary. So we'll do a primary, secondary. If you had infinite resources, staffing not a problem, and money not a problem, and everything was taken care of, what would the trip from your kids in your area? Because you've spoken before about the kids in your area, obviously coming from less worldly, more deprived. What would you say could be the trip that would be maybe life-changing for them?
I'd say anything that links the beach with outdoor activities, because there's kids on our estate who have barely left the estate for various reasons, transport or money or lack of parental drive to actually give them experiences. So there's kids who have never been to the beach, and if we could do a residential where we stayed at the beach and they did all the things that you would get from like a forest school, but in that sort of environment, that'd be mind-blowing to some of them.
So you can imagine like scuba diving or something along surfing, scuba diving, bodyboarding.
Anything that would stretch them. I mean, I think that's the main purpose of a residential, really, is to widen the horizons and challenge them in ways that they wouldn't have in the classroom. That's basically what it's got to be. So having something like that would be incredible. And I mean, I had one of my kids a few weeks before we finished said, I'm going to Liverpool. I'm going to Liverpool with my mum. Now, this is a Polish kid who's lived over here for about a year. And I said, "Oh, that's great. What are you looking forward to?" "Going on the train. I've never been on a train," he said. And that's not just a Polish thing. There's kids in my class who've lived on the estate who've never been on a train. And sometimes we take things like that for granted. Go on the beach, we did that when we were kids. Going on a train, it happens every now and then. But it's just mind-blowing to some of them that they actually could do those sorts of things. And that's what a residential should be, giving them experiences that they wouldn't normally get.
And the other thing is you get to see the other side, don't you? I saw a lot the other side of, again, residentials. I've seen sides of personalities of children that didn't know were there, talents that I didn't know were there. I saw a student last week who, struggles academically. Guy went up a climbing wall like a cat, absolutely up the climbing wall. Like, it's just so natural. Looked at the instructor and said, "That's natural body smarts." And it just fluidly, without even thinking, as soon as he came back down, of course, he got the harness all mixed up, nearly tripped over again. I thought, oh, he's back to normal. And it was one of those things that you saw a child that I didn't think had any sort of, hasn't got a lot of confidence in his academic abilities and struggles will follow instructions. But once the harness was on and once that climbing wall was there, I said, right, up you go, I'll time you. And he was up and down that wall like an absolute, Batman. It was amazing. And it was amazing to have that conversation with that student who normally my interactions are, what are you doing? Why'd you do that? I'll keep asking the questions and I keep getting answers I don't want to know. But there I was able to go, wow, you're a good climber. You're a natural climber. And now I'm able to know that. Come anytime I'm sort of saying, well, that time you went up that climbing wall, you've got a natural. Did you ever think about doing something like that? That could be that conversation or that little discovery. It's like the Lewis Hamilton thing. If Lewis Hamilton's dad hadn't been into go-karting, he wouldn't have been a world champion. If Rory McIlroy's dad hadn't been taking him down to a golf course at 4 years old, he wouldn't be. If Mozart's dad hadn't bought him a piano, surely, it's the thing, isn't it? One of I often think, you always look at yourself and think, if I had those opportunities. First time I had McDonald's, I was 18 years old when I went to Ecuador because there's no McDonald's in Northern Ireland because they kept blowing them up. There's a long story in that. Well, when my protection money. But that's the thing. My first time I got on an airplane was going away, and you think that was the opportunity to open my eyes to the world, and that was done for me. And that's why I've always thought that residentials are one of the most important things that we do as schools. But as you're saying, and I'm both saying as well, they are a risk-taking exercise. They are a nervous-taking exercise. They are, they're tricky now, and they are complicated. And I think they become more complicated. What do you think then, Paul, that some of the children now, you're going to have a disparity. Some children have been to the beach. Some of your children probably have been on holidays abroad. Do you see the difference between the haves and the have-nots, the massive difference between them? Because I see that. I see children who have 2 or 3 foreign holidays a year versus children who have never been on a foreign holiday. And of course, the correlation is the children that have those other experiences just so happen to be the ones who I think have the cultural capital to do better. They're more confident. They're more. You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah. There's kids in class who've, like you say, have been fortunate enough to go on regular holidays, this, that, and the other. I think when it comes to learning about topics and things, but generally about the world or things like that, geography is a good one. They tend to be quite good, but there's also ways that kids who've almost been fortunate to do all of those things and have it handed to them, when they're given a challenge, one that might make them feel a little bit scared or a little bit uncomfortable, sometimes it can work the other way. They're less willing to put themselves out there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's kids who've had to go through so many things at home and everything else. Maybe a kid in a family of 5 kids, 6 kids, who often have to, not fend for themselves all the time, or maybe sometimes fend for themselves, but have to stick up for themselves or be strong in sort of certain uncertain situations. And it's interesting how kids can thrive in some challenges that might seem really difficult, whereas kids who have been handed everything to them aren't ready for that kind of.
It's the street smarts, isn't it? It's that kind of.
It is. Yeah, maybe not
street smarts, isn't it? Yeah. It's the worldliness. In some ways, they are more worldly, more tuned, more confident in the real world. It's that difference between academic smarts versus around the world people smarts. Because I learned pretty quick the people smarts because that's one of the reasons I was able to travel around the world. because I suppose the thing is, my parents always imbued me with curiosity and risk taking. So I was actually encouraged to take risks as a child. And equally, if I got hurt, I mean, of course, my mother's terrible for it. I broke my ankle about 4 years ago playing football. The first response was, well, you still got another working ankle. You're all right, son. So I'd say that the resilience and stoicism from my parents is beyond off the scale, basically. So I'm quite fortunate. And again, my two best friends are the same. We all, as soon as we hit a certain, and that's in our culture, as soon as we hit a certain age, there's people in my village, half of them relocated to New York. And I went to New York, and there I arrived, and I remember 61st in Woodside in Queens. And there was half my class there. It was what's the word for it? It was just assumed that we would go and see the world at a certain age, culturally speaking, because that was that was what we was expected to do. But I was only able to do some of that because of the residential trips I'd been on, because what Adam was saying earlier on, there was a culture of it in our school, a culture of it in our community, a culture of outwardly looking on towards the world, even though we came from which was on paper a deprived background in the situation which we were dealing with, the troubles. But we were still always outwardly looking, still always looking to be educated. And I suppose that's the thing is, my best friend said this to me on my wedding day, and as part of my wedding speech, and he says the worst part about traveling around the world with me was, even when you didn't ask for a geography and history lesson, you just got a geography and history lesson. And I am terrible for it. In other words, I see residentials as a learning opportunity. I've always seen, anytime I travel, as a learning opportunity. I'm taking my children to France. I'm going to be getting them to be speaking French, because I see that as not just a trip to France to sit on a beach or anything. I see it as a learning opportunity, which I think I've carried into education, where I'm pro, wanting to do residentials. But even I, who's pro-residential, has exactly the same niggle of, do I want to run them? No. Do I want the bureaucracy? No. Do I want the responsibility of looking after other people's children? No. Do I want to ring a parent up and say, sorry, your child has just had an accident? Oh my word, it's the worst phone call ever to make, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't know whether I don't know whether this was a deliberate link or anything about being worldly and culture or anything, but Miss T is here as well.
Oh yes. Oh, is Miss T going to speak?
Oh,
I think.
Hello, Miss T.
Hi. How are you?
How's Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, it's good. I'm back in sunny North Wales for the summer.
Oh, whereabouts?
I'm literally just outside of Ruthin.
Oh, yeah. Lovely. I love North
Wales.
Wales.
That's where I live. This is where I've lived for years. So back here for what you could suppose can call summer. It's not really summer.
Well, you're on that wild Atlantic coast, Irish Sea, but it gets the Atlantic current as well. So and here, windswept.
Yeah, windswept and interesting. But so I was just gonna talk about like a hilarious school trip. So
far away.
Yeah, so when I taught up here, every year we used to have a skills week where, like, the last week of term, we would do, every single year group would do like mad activities, like every day was something different. And I used to take year 9 to Chester Zoo. And so over 2 days, I would take 80 students a day to Chester Zoo. And it was wild. Like, you're talking about like risks and stuff, and then we just didn't have the staffing, so I used to have to put them in groups. So I'd have 80 kids, I'd have between 10 and 12 groups, and we'd have little rendezvous points throughout the day and things like that. And it used to be like my ultimate fear was that one of them would go missing, or one of them would try and get into something, or like cause chaos in the bat cave, or just like, it was, I used to be literally anxiety riddled for the 48 hours that I had to take the 2 groups. But and we only had one incident over 4 years, and
please tell me it's not a lion.
It wasn't a lion, thankfully. It was in the butterfly house, bizarrely enough, and it was in the butterfly house, and I'd love to know the science behind this, but I don't know. But this poor boy just got absolutely swarmed by butterflies. And, normally they're quite aloof when you walk through a butterfly house. They sometimes land on you.
That's like a scene from Avatar when all the little things
This
come.
poor child was covered in butterflies. They were all on his face. They were all like on his hands. They were. It was like he was sweating, and they were going for that.
It's got to be pheromones. It's got to be some pheromones.
Or
so it's aftershave or something.
Or something scented he's used. But this poor child, like,
maybe the mating season.
I just don't think he didn't know he had a fear of butterflies, but he definitely had a fear of butterflies. So he was just screaming, and all these butterflies were all on him. And the poor kid was borderline catatonic by the time we got him out. And the Chester Zoo staff were amazing, and they were like, because obviously they have to be so careful. They were like trying to individually pick butterflies off him. And he's like screaming. And when we got him out, like, I had to phone his mom, because he was so stressed, and like I'd got a suspicion. I couldn't tell, but I got a suspicion he might have wet himself, and like he was super stressed. So I phoned his mom, and his mom was I had to basically tell the story like 4 times on the phone, because she was like, what's happened?
Butterflies.
Butterfly house. And I was like, listen, I know it doesn't sound that bad. I was like, but it actually was quite traumatic.
He had to be there.
I was like, they were sort of all on his face, and he's like really scared. And when she got there, this poor, the best way I can describe it is, if you're a Harry Potter fan, it looked like Dudley after the Dementors. He was grey and like clammy. And I said to his mom, I was like, I don't think it's medical, but I do think he's had a full-blown like sort of a panic attack. And luckily Mom was great. Mom was amazing. And she was like, that you couldn't write it. And I was like in Chester Zoo were apologizing, and they didn't know why it had happened. And then I kept getting stopped by like members of the public asking if the boy from the butterflies was okay, because it was just like this poor child. But yeah, I used to just be so stressed that one of them was going to try and get in with a rhino, or just, you know.
So look at me this. Paul takes a child and says, no on the top bunk. Child falls off the bottom bunk and has to go to hospital. You take a child to a zoo full of dangerous animals, and he gets accosted by butterflies.
Like, and it was mad. But then you guys then said about how like it's so worth it, and like, and it is. Yeah. So I had one of the greatest moments of my life. Was there was a young boy, and he was from Chester, and he was very much one of these boys where gaming was just his life. He did not care about the outdoors. He wasn't outdoorsy at all. And one of the few kids who I could genuinely see going on to do some sort of profession to do with gaming, because he was very serious about it, and all the rest of it. And he stopped me in when we were walking around the zoo, and he was like, "Miss," and I was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "I didn't know that camels were real," and I was like, "Sorry," and he was like, "The one with the humps," and I was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "I didn't think they were real." He was like, "I thought they were like unicorns." And I was like, "Oh,
and what age?
Year 9.
13, 14.
I know.
Oh my word.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "We've done about them in biology with adaptation and camels." And he was like, "Yeah." He was like, "But I didn't think they actually looked like that." He was like, "I didn't think they actually had humps on their back." Wow. Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, they're real." And I kept seeing him, and he was never that far from the camels.
Because fascinated by what, but isn't that the glorious moment that happens of learning when, and it happens in the classroom sometimes, but it doesn't happen, I think exponentially doesn't happen as much as, or as quick as what you get when you're out doing something like that, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, the learning capacity, the memory making. I'm sure somebody studied the memory of it. I mean, I can remember my school trips, because it's the same as the memory of holidays. There's something about committing that kind of memory. It's the visceral thing. It's the touch, the smell, the sound. It hits all the senses, doesn't it?
For sure. And like, we had some like really funny moments where like, where, you know, we had one student, for example, who was hearing impaired, and had only recently joined the school, and she'd never been to a zoo, and she went into the monkey enclosure and she wouldn't come out for ages because she just loved the noise, because it's so echoey in there, it's really loud. And she was like, and she just didn't, she knew that they made noise, but she'd never been able to hear it as clearly as she could in the monkey enclosure in the zoo. And so she was absolutely in awe of the noise that they made, because in Chester Zoo they've got howler monkeys, so they were really like loud, and everyone else is running through because it's so loud. But for her, it was just, she was just loving it. She was like, I didn't know that they sounded like this. I didn't know it was this loud, and and she could really hear them. And so for me, it's always worth the risk. It's got to be.
And that's, I'm still on that side of it, even though all of the doubts and the fears that I have when I'm out with the kids and taking the kids out somewhere, and you just see that moment, showing them something like the Himalayas. I had that 5 years ago, showed the kids in the Himalayas. I sat with one of my pupils just looking at the Himalayas at 5 o'clock in the morning, the sunrise. And it's just one of those, he just turns and says, "Sir, I'm so glad I'm here." And you just go, "I'm so glad I'm here." And you share those moments together. That's the thing. To talk about relationships, there's nothing better that builds relationships than shared collective experience, isn't it?
I got a fat kid to finish D.V. Silver. And she was buzzing.
Davy's brilliant, isn't it? Davy is absolutely brilliant.
Never, this was the biggest physical challenge she had ever done. And she finished it. And I was like, and she finished, and not even like at the back. She wasn't even at the back. She finished with everyone else.
Yeah.
And she tried to quit like 3 or 4 times, and I was like, no. I was like, we're not quitting, because if we quit, I have to go back and get my car, and this is really irritating for me. So we're going to carry on walking. And she finished.
Yeah, I've done Davy, but I have to take somebody with me who's a little more gentle than me. Somebody gentle is always need to be put with me, because I find myself into Sergeant Major mode, where I go beast mode. And I also start doing it as well. So I'm terribly competitive. I'm so bad for it. But I always think it's a good thing, because you want to lead by example, like climbing and stuff like that. And say, I can do it. Come on, I'm an old guy, and up I go. And they're like, you show it off against her. Well, come on. And don't get me wrong, I'm scared too as well. But there's nothing better when you show them, conquer your fears. Yeah. And I think, if anything, I think you've hit the nail on the head again. Like Paul had. I think a generation of children actually probably need these residentials more because of the sedentary lifestyle, because, like you say, they think a camel doesn't exist. I think they're in danger of retreating from the world. Yeah. And again, post-COVID, I think we need to get them back into that world out there, get them into residential, get them into trips. Yeah. So I think the need is never more there. Yeah, but the barriers to it are stronger. So there's kind of two things working in the opposite. We need to do them more, but our ability to do them, because of cost, bureaucracy, all the things we've discussed, are pushing back against. So you've got two things pushing the opposite direction. And I think in the end, what should win is our desire to enrich children by taking them on residentials should be stronger. And I think Paul said, benefited from that. I say that, and equally Adam, who's currently on a residential right now with kids in Portugal, is saying exactly the same thing. But it's not to say I don't understand why some staff don't do it. I'm in that situation where I get why some people don't want to do them, because their fear is they don't want to take the risk. But I'm like you, absolutely, Miss T. I'm with residential all the way. In fact, I think when I retire, I'm probably going to end up in an outdoor residential centre.
I mean, the thing is for me is like I've actually refused before to do one. So like a couple of years ago, I was invited on the ski trip, and I refused to do it. I was like, get somebody else to do it, because I've got no interest in skiing. And I'm also acutely aware that skiing is just accident prone. Like it's just, kids break knees, kids break ankles, don't they, when they ski?
Staff. When my last ski trip I went 12 years ago, one of my colleagues had, she was 6 months out. She was in the cast for 6 months. She had surgery. It was actually one of our children that skied her into a mountain. God bless her. Poor kid never lived it down.
But yeah, so I refused to go because I said like, I it's not for me, and like I feel like if I'm going to run trips or if I'm going to do trips, I want it to be something I'm passionate about, interested in, and can push that passion onto the kids and to really enthuse them. I'm not going to enthuse them with skiing because, and I don't want to be responsible for what is just super dangerous. And I don't think, for me, the risk outweighs the reward with a ski trip. For that,
I suppose that's the point, isn't it? You've got to put the round peg in the round hole.
it.
I mean, that's why last week I was on activity week, and the staff that went on that activity week all joined in. They all climbed, they all abseiled, because they're the type, it was 2 PE teachers, myself and another colleague. And you sort of think, we were there because we had already sort of bought into it. We already volunteered, so you had the willing. And therefore, it was a really successful week because the staff pulled together. We were there not because we were told we were there. It's intrinsic. We were there because we wanted to be. We believe in what we were delivering.
And that was like the and D of E for me. Like, these are things that I believe are super enriching for these kids. And so I'm already 100% on board, and I'm as excited getting off that bus going to the zoo as they are. Like, I'm like, whoa, day at the zoo.
Not the butterfly enclosure.
Maybe not about the butterflies, but, like, I'm super excited and I'm super keen for it. And I think that that's also important. And I do see sometimes on Twitter staff who've had horrible experiences at, like, PGL and other sort of residentials. And it is often that they were forced to go. And I do think that that's a problem. I think that it has to be voluntary, and it has to be something that the staff are comfortable doing as well, because accidents often happen.
It's a mentality thing, isn't it? You've got to go in with that right mentality. But I'd say it's the same in teaching. If you go in with the mentality of, I think it mirrors teaching. And again, it's a choice of subject. If you're forced to do a subject you don't want to do, and you're forced to teach it a way you don't want to teach it, there's a lot in choice. Because I suppose the thing is, if the residential is choice as well, the children choose to come. And that's the same with the children. There's nothing worse than the children who are like, oh, I didn't want to go on this trip with my parents. And I had a couple of them last week. Oh, parents thought it'd be good for me to go and do this. And I'm like, oh, you're being dragged here. Versus, I can't wait to do this, sir. Can you wait to go? And it's like the children I'm taking away next year to Borneo already. They've fundraised. They've been fundraising. They're already, sir, can we do some fun? It's fitness. So they're already knocking down the door to me, saying, when are we going to do some fitness? Because it's their trip. They're fundraising for their trip, which means they're earning the right to go on that trip. I suppose that's the other thing as well, is, some colleagues do believe that some children don't deserve to go on a trip. I don't think that sometimes. I think sometimes we've taken a risk on children who others have said, never, don't take that child in a residential. And from that residential, you see a different side of that child, and you've changed the course of art. I think they are a great, game changer, residentials.
When I took year 9 to the zoo, like, I had a really strict thing of, like, every child can come to the zoo. Like, doesn't matter what their behaviour, attendance, whatever, every child is on that trip automatically. If they mess around on the day, I've got a member of staff with a car to take them home, but that's irrelevant. The fact is that everyone's invited. And I had loads of staff be like, oh gosh, you're brave taking those, or you're brave taking this one or that. They were golden. And they were golden because it was a day at the zoo. They were allowed to go around with their friends, and they were in uniform, so I could easily spot them. I had kids who truanted, who were a nightmare in school, but they were at that meeting place at the right time every time, like, because I gave them the freedom, I gave them the responsibility, and I said, you go and do this. And then I got the absolute pleasure of walking back into school and being like, you were wrong. You were wrong about those boys. You were wrong about that girl, or you were wrong about these. They were perfect. And then being able to phone their parents and say they were amazing. Like,
and that's that phone call that they're used to getting sometimes, because the phone call you're used to getting sometimes is this, that. And that's the conversation I had with some of the parents as I took the kids off the bus. I had one student who kept me up until 1:15. He says, oh, sir, it's going to ruin the week. He says, no, you've been brilliant apart from this. And I would say that to your mum. And mum came to me and says, oh, I'm sorry. He says, no, he had a bad moment. But at the same time, I saw this, and this. Yeah. Because there was more positive and good. And it's about changing that narrative. That actually, it is worth. And don't get me wrong, there has been horror. Some of my colleagues have had horrible residentials where some children have just gone and done horrible things. It does happen. No matter what you do, it's choices. No matter what you do, sometimes even you do it right. Like, take your kids to the zoo, the butterflies will catch them, or put kids in the boat and they'll fall out of the bottom. You cannot. Human beings are human beings. Kids are kids, and sometimes you've done everything right, and it just hasn't worked. But then you get back on the horse, and for every time it doesn't work, there's 10 times I think it works. And that's I think my law of averages, because of all the residentials I've been on. There's been few that I've walked out and said, "Oh God, that was horrible." There's been some that have horrible moments, but my 19 years, and I've done, God, how many residentials now? I've done maybe 1 or 2 a year, and mostly with my tutor group. I've always gone on residential with my tutor group. And that's one of the things to build up the relationship after 5 years. One of the things I'm always talking about. Remember in year 7, you did this, remember you fell off the swing, and it just builds this relationship. But I'm going to have to look at the time, because we've gone way over, but I could not go way over. Tom's got to tell me off for this, because he's like, this is typical me. But I'll just leave you with this one. Lepidopterophobia is the fear of butterflies or moths. Lepidopterophobia. There you go. It's the fear of butterflies and moths. If anybody out there has got lepidopterophobia, God bless you. But yeah, thank you, Miss T, and thank you to Paul as well. And thank you for Adam from Portugal. Thank you for Tom for adminning. And don't forget, we are sponsored by Pearson MFL, who, of course, talk of cultural capital. Languages does brilliant for cultural capital. And again, if we are going to do some residentials abroad, nothing better than taking children on a residential abroad where they actually get to speak a foreign language. Not only do they get to speak a foreign language, they're able to translate it back into their native language, which I think increases their confidence. And that's one of the things that Pearson have tried to do with their new MFL, is try and make the curriculum more accessible and more contemporary. So less of the 1990s stuff and a lot more of the contemporary stuff. So not looking for the horse butchers, but looking for something that is, like, for instance, a lot more relevant to them in these days. So that's Pearson's MFL qualification, ready to go in 2024. Don't forget, you can be a host of us, Teacher Talk Radio. Some of the guys who phoned in have later gone become hosts. So Paul and Miss T, there you are, 2 individuals who I think would make fantastic Teacher Talk Radio hosts. We get to have good banter with people like myself and Tom and many of the others in the team as well.
Paul told me, Brent, that he couldn't do it because he's not as good as you. That's what he said to me when I asked him.
Oh, Paul is brilliant. I think Paul, I would happily share. I'd happily walk through Paul. We more than happy for Paul. That I get meant to you, Paul. You'd be brilliant. You'd be absolutely brilliant. Look, if Tom can do it, and he's a fellow Evertonian, you can do it. You know what I mean?
There's hope for us all.
Well, next season maybe. At least you've got a midfield. It's not been off to Saudi Arabia or somewhere else. My gosh. Let's not start on that one. Is there something on 9 o'clock, Tom, on the other side?
Not today. Paul's not on, I don't think, this week.
Cool.
The other Paul, not that
brilliant.
Paul.
No, the other Paul. So I'm taking a break for a week. I'll be in France, so I don't think I'm going to be able to get signal from the Massif Central. I might send a smoke signal up, so I'll be off next week, obviously. And I think I need to check for the week after. I might be doing that one from Ireland. So you might get a Teacher Talk Radio first from the mountains of Mourne, where the White Walkers come. Actually, literally where Game of Thrones is set. Yeah, literally my home is where Game of Thrones is set. Have you not noticed that? I'm definitely one of the Stark homeland people. The wild north, that's where I come from. Anyway, so it's been a pleasure. Thanks for listening. And of course, you can listen to any of our Teacher Talk radios on Podbeam, and you can also get us this Twitter space for the next 30 days. And equally, if you are taking a bit of a summer break, you can download any of our stuff and stick it on your old iPlayer or whatever you get. iPod. I got an iPod the other day. I dug it out. I had an iPod from 15 years ago. My music taste has not changed in 15 years. That's all I'm going to say. I've got my old iPod with 7,000 songs on it. And I still would listen to exactly the same music I listened to 15 years ago. That's all I'm going to say on that one. So if you've got your iPod, it still downloads podcasts onto iPods. So there you go. Anyway, thank you. And
you've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.